Good evening. This is Gloria Taylor Brown, and I'd like to welcome you to a Gathering of Priestesses. This is our 53rd edition of Gathering of Priestesses. And with us this evening is Linda Fitch. She is a practicing shaman who's been working for a number of years in Peru. She's trained hundreds of students in shamanic trainings and has special emphasis on conscious dying. We'll have to talk about that later. I have some issues there I need help with. She's the former CEO of the Four Winds Society and the Dean of the Light Body School, and has developed Dying Consciously Teacher Training Program. She has a number of different programs that she works with, including NLP, shamanism, grief and ritual, archetypes, and classic psychopomp work. She's known for her groundbreaking classes and workshops and has led 10 expeditions to the Holy Mountains of Peru. And in 10 days, she will be heading for the mountains of Peru again, to the mountain of Salcantay. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. That's that beautiful mountain that I had the picture of in the sign-up y'all signed up on. And she's in high demand at different venues and conferences around the world. She's worked with hospice, grief counselors, and intuitives to better serve their clients and their communities. She's also a business consultant and specializes in how to teach. She has a new program, which she's going to be talking about tonight, called Change Your Story, Change Your Life. We were talking about a little bit about that in the green room before we got it started. And we look forward to that. She's taught at Omega, Kripalu, Alternatives, Esalen, Mount Madonna, and East West. So, Linda, you have your biography is impressive. You can tell us a little more about some of it. I also wish to welcome my co-host and best friend, Catherine Ravenwood. Thank you so much for being present.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is always necessary for me. She grounds me, and if I get too far out there, she has been given the leash.
I've been given the sacred leash.
The sacred leash.
And I know how to use it.
To pull me back in because she doesn't want to explain how I got lost. And so, for those of you who thought I was leashless, I'm not. Anyway, Linda, thank you so much for being with us this evening. And on this show, this is primarily a conversation, but there is one question that we always want to ask, and that is, how did you get on the path of the priestess?
Well, I first want to give my huge thanks to you, Gloria, and to you, Catherine. So appreciate the invitation to be here. I'm just really, really honored to sit with you two as wisdom keepers. So very, very, very honored with that. And in thinking about, because you sent me that question, Gloria, you know, that path of the priestess, and I had never thought of myself in those ways. And yet at the same time, that path of the feminine, that path of the priestess is exactly part of that shamanic tradition. And I think what attracted me and pulled me to that path of the feminine is one of the very first times when I went to Peru, and you see these, you know, these, not only the Peruvians with their hats and their ponchos and, you know, in their very traditional attire, but you see these other grown men that are praying to the Mother Earth. Because so much of our training in our Western world is we pray up. You know, we pray up to the God above us, but we don't pray to the earth. And I recognized that really it is this feminine is the piece that we don't connect with. You know, that our teaching isn't about connecting into that feminine, and that's what we want. Yes, we want to have the above to connect into up to spirit, if we want to call it that way, but it's really this feminine that, as you say, that Catherine, that grounds you. It's that feminine that grounds us, that holds us, that creates this place of abundance. So it was just a lovely question to even go, gosh, why did I choose this, and what an honor to be in that frame that sits with both of you.
Yeah, well, you know, what we have looked at, and of course we started with this program with Ann Key and Candace Cant's book, Stepping Into Ourselves, a book about writings of priestesses. And so over the time, we've had people who come on and said, I'm not a priestess. I don't want, I am an observer of priestesses, one woman said. She says, I am a poetess, and what I do is I observe the way other people hold space for others. And so we've had a lot of, and we've had people say, I don't think I am a priestess. I think that I'm just who I am. But what I know is that a priestess, at least in my definition, is someone who serves the divine. It is a woman, because of the feminine ending, who allows their body, their mouth, their eyes, their hands to be the vessels that do the work of God here on earth. I don't care what you call God. In other words, I always used to say, God doesn't mind what you call her.
Yeah.
But there are, the idea that divinity, whatever divinity, and divinity may not be a single being. It may be multiple beings. I don't know. All I know is there is something that is divine. There is something that has breathed a spark of life into us that has caused us to look up to the heavens and say, God, I know you're out there somewhere. Or look down at the earth and say, God, I know you're there. And I know you're listening. So, the idea that these people are praying to the earth, to Pachamama, to the Gaia, whatever you want to call it, we are held and supported by this earth. And we are also held and supported by the sky above us and by the atmosphere and by everything else. And it's like there was this magical moment when life began, not only life on this planet, but life that said, I can look in a mirror and I know who I am. And that's where we stand different from the majority of animals. And so as we do that, and the idea of conscious dying or consciously working on ourselves, I've known, and I do not insult any of my friends who have absolutely wonderful pets. But you know what? None of your pets work on themselves. Maybe it's makes them better than us, but most of us realize that we can be more than we started out with. And I think that doing that work and doing some of the work you've done, and I noticed you worked with Sobonfu, and I love Sobonfu, and some of the work that you've done with Michael Harner and Alberto Vialdo, you have had to step into a space where you have brought in really fascinating and different information. I'd love to hear some more about that.
Thank you. And one of the pieces, I think, as we talk about that priestess and the feminine, is very much that a lot of our models are very patriarchal models. And again, I'm in no way discounting that, but it needs that balance. The Peruvian, so a good part of my training is from the Peruvian shaman, where I first started. And that's where they talk about, they call it the Yananti and the Masinti. So they talk about these complementary opposites, that we always want to be in right relationship, to recognize that each has its own value that it brings to the world, and yet we want to hold them both in relationship with it. I know so many people that they hold, it's either one or the other, instead of, yes, let's have both, and let's bring both into balance in our lives. So it's that place of balance. How do we live in that balance? So whether it's with conscious dying or whether it is changing your story. So, and I love that we were talking about earlier where you were saying that you're in your Wild Women program, that you have them put the story aside, that they can't even bring the story in, because as soon as we make our reference point of who we are as that story, that takes us into all of that past history of whether it is family, whether it's cultural, whether it's ego, you know, all those other kind of stories that we think who we are. So how do we, what I love about the shamanic work is how do you shift and change that gracefully instead of it being such a difficult place and so many years spent changing it? How do you put an end to it? You know, how do you complete that unfinished business so that you can be ready to jump over to the other side whenever it happens? You know, to be fully present to go over to it. So I know that's a whole mixed question, but I'll put it right back to you.
Yeah. Well, all right. You know, one of the things that I'm doing right now is, in a way, I am doing psychopomp work in that I am sitting with and working with my husband as he prepares to leave this body. And every day and every time it teaches me something new. Mainly it's teaching me patience right now. Lots and lots of patience, which a Taurus with Aries rising doesn't have very often. But it's how do we create this atmosphere that he can step out of his body in the standard medical model. And that's one of the things we're looking at right now. I mean, I don't have the option. He's physically too disabled to be able to be brought home, unless I had, you know, 3 or 4 people staying here all the time. I've tried that. And so therefore he's in a nursing home. And how do you allow somebody to step across the barriers when they're in a space that sort of is designed around keeping them alive, no matter what?
And that whole medical system is designed for that. It isn't designed in any way. I mean, that is even with the Hippocratic Oath that they take is to keep someone alive with it. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I think I love about shamanism that it offers in 2 different ways is an understanding when someone is in that place of dying that it's actually different brains that get activated. So even if they've done, you and I and Catherine that have, you know, dedicated their lives to really saying, let me keep working on this stuff that comes up. So even in that place, when we hit those last moments, or even this time period that you have with your husband, is that there's still that reptilian brain that's all about keeping us alive that gets activated. That then, I mean, that brain is about keeping us alive, that helps us breathe. Then that's what activates that emotional brain that brings up the fear. So, and everything in a lot of our medical system keys into that. So one of the shamanic tools, which I'm sure you're really familiar with, is to bring ceremony in. Mm-hmm. Because what it does is it allows that emotional brain, that limbic brain, to come into stillness. It doesn't override it, but it allows it to come to stillness. So any kind of small ceremonial things that you can do with your husband or have him in those moments participate in is one of the things that you can bring in. Mm-hmm. One of the others is just a short story. So there's the one I was working with just a month ago, and that was in the process of dying, just passed over last week, a couple days ago. And what she would do is she was at home, and she would just take a little stick when she felt the stuff come up, blow it into a stick, and she was in Sun Valley, and she'd put it in the fire because it was still cold enough up there. So she'd put it in the fire. Mm-hmm. So a little ceremony, anything helps. The other thing is, if he's open, and you could do it too, is to journey out past that time of when he crosses. So he gets comfortable and familiar with that time of going out and then coming back and going out and coming back, where we recognize that, you know, this is just what a gift to have a body for such a short period of time, and yet it's okay to go out, to be able to do that. And then the third thing, how much is he open to letting go of some of that stuff, that unfinished business, you know, those things that hold us, those regrets, those kind of, how, you know, miracles can happen. And sometimes, you know, people cross over in the same way that they've lived. And yet we hold that space for something that is that moment of being able to choose to let everything go.
Well, I know Raven just went through this with her sister, and you know, so I don't want to bring up any sadness for her.
That's okay.
But yeah, I know that your sister had some concerns whenever she was looking at passing on, and I think do you want to tell the story, or do you want me to?
Well, no, it's fine. Thank you. She'd been ill for a long time, many close calls. And we were at another close call, and she was able to sit and talk to me for like an hour at a time, which she had not been able to do that for a long time. And I'd say, "Are you tired?" And she'd say, "Yeah, but I need you to stay." And she'd talk to me about her disappointments in her life. And they're very personal, so I'm not going to go into them. But they were things she had not really said to me before. And we were always very close. And while she was telling me, I was just like, wow, this is great. And she, you know, I was very surprised. And she was able to let go of these things. And also when my mother was dying, my mother, my whole life, apologized for everything. "Oh, I'm sorry the sun is out. You know, oh, I'm sorry it's cloudy. Oh, you know," she apologized for everything. And as she went into her last 6 weeks of life, I know, well, even longer than that, I noticed she was no longer apologizing for anything. And she was never very demonstrative, and people would come in and she'd, "Oh, I love you. I'm so glad to see you." I'm like, whoa, this is new. And so I was the one who had to turn her in her bed and change the diaper and help her to get a shower and all the, you know, a bath and bathe her. And she never said to me, "I'm sorry, you girls have to do this for me." I was so proud of her to be able to accept, because she said, "I'm done." And then to be able to accept that I'm done, and that means my daughters have to do things for me that I would never have asked them to do. She didn't complain if we didn't do it well, and she never apologized. And so that's the biggest gift my mother ever gave me, I think, was watching her die. It was amazing. And I didn't get to actually be with my sister when she died, but I was with her the week before. And it's beautiful to watch people let go. Just to say, you know, I'm done with that.
Catherine, both your stories give me tears in my eyes. I mean, that is exactly what that work is to be able to be present and for someone. Yeah.
And I couldn't do any overt shamanic work with either one of them because of their religion, which is fine. I didn't need to. But one thing that I really noticed about my mother, people said to me, "Oh, you're going to go down and work on your mom, you know?" And I said, "No. My mother wants to die. Why would I want to do healing work on her? Are you kidding? Well, are you gonna call her on all this shit in your life?" I said, "No. She's dying. For God's sake, leave the woman alone, you know?" But the really big thing that I noticed, I'd go in and sit. I was with her for the last month she was alive, and I'd go in every day and sit with her and hold her hand. And just sit with her. And I went in one day and I got a big strong "do not touch her." And instead of sitting at her side, I went and sat by her feet. And I never touched her again. Well, I might have, you know, patted her and "I love you, Mom," but I did not sit and hold her hand. And I did not hold her feet or anything. I just sat with her.
Yeah.
And Spirit very clearly said, "Do not hold her hand. You're keeping her back."
Yeah. So beautiful, because that is actually what happens, is because when somebody hasn't worked through you've worked through your pieces with your mom, it sounds like, so you weren't hanging on to her.
Right.
And that's what happens when someone hasn't worked their issues with their mom or their issues with their dad, is they just hold them back.
Right?
Yeah.
And at some point, you may not have your issues worked out, but that's too bad.
Right.
It's like, this isn't really about you.
Right.
It's about their dying. This isn't about you, so just get over it. And I really felt that way. And I just didn't really, I had no desire to go in and say, gee, Mom, how come you never blah, 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 blah. I've always wanted to talk to you about that. I mean, how horrible would that be? Would have been a terrible thing to do. Instead, she got to die peacefully, and we could always tell when she was out there. And she'd come back and talk to us about stuff. It's like, oh, Mom's getting close. And it was fun for her. She was anticipating it. She was looking forward to it, and she wanted to go. So there was no reason to restrict her in any way.
Yeah. It sounds like you had such a gift with her.
It was beautiful.
Having that time with her and with your sister. And that's what I'd say, Catherine, too. You have the same thing then, Gloria, that you have is that it's a gift to have time with your husband. Because it could have happened just so quickly where you didn't have that chance to say, I love you, or whoever else that needed, or maybe it's his time, to take that extra time to let go of whatever.
Yeah, well, my husband actually has what is called Lewy body dementia, which means most of the time he knows who he is and he knows where he is, but sometimes he gets a little bit confused about other things like people in the room and who people are and where we are and where he's going. And so the other day he told me that he wanted me to understand that he had fallen in love with a new woman. And I said, well, okay, what's her name? And he says, well, her name is Nona. I said, well, who is she? Well, she's one of the nurses. Well, there's no nurse named Nona there. And so it's like, okay, well, that's all right. If you want to fall in love with her, do you still love me? Oh, yes, I still love you. But I wanted you to know that I'm in love with Nona, and she's very beautiful. And so I'm like, okay, that's fine. So one of the women that is actually the receptionist of the nursing homes, her husband has just been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. And things are going very swiftly very bad. And I was explaining to her, I said, well, I've decided that what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a book about how to keep your sense of humor when your partner's losing their mind.
Yeah, yeah. My mother-in-law was diagnosed with Alzheimer's when she was 49. So, and I think, and of course it's never the Alzheimer's that's the final thing. And I didn't know all my shamanic work then. So then as I got my training, she was one of those that I worked with because, of course, they're not caught once they've crossed over in that time-space continuum.
Mm-hmm.
So to work with her, and just that realization of how much they aren't present, that all the things that to work with her, because a lot of times it was and helping her actually cross over fully instead of becoming earthbound. So, and that's part of that shamanic work that, that in that helping cross over so they know where they go, so when that time comes up. Yeah.
But even if you're helping someone cross over, whether or not they're crossing over because, it's going to be a long-term thing, or simply because they have that disease called life, I think that, allowing us to be able to get up, I come from a Cherokee family, and be able to get up in the morning and say, this is a good day to die. Yeah. That I have basically everything in order in such a way. I mean, not that I have everything in order, or heaven forbid that I should die, because then after all somebody would have to come in and take care of my dirty dishes. But
throw them out, Gloria.
Huh?
We just throw them out.
That's all right. Okay. You can throw anything here out you want. But it's just that the idea of being in that space of accepting that if you died today, would it be okay?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the person most of us have to work on conscious dying with is ourselves.
Yes. I mean, that is the only person to really deal with is what do we have that we still need to work with. There's actually, I'm not sure if you guys have heard, there's a really wonderful conference that I speak at every year that's called the Afterlife Awareness Conference. And they have, Raymond Moody's been coming for the last 5 years. Eben Alexander comes, a variety of psychic comes. And the woman who's also, I would say, that sponsors us, very much a priestess, and she has shamans come. So she covers that spiritual place. Mm-hmm. So one of my talks that I give on this Friday is all about, from a shamanic perspective, how do you work on that unfinished business? And the first journey we're going to do is exactly that. You know, if you were at that place of death today, now, this moment, you know, what are those regrets? And then how do you take death almost like that you can have a dialogue on an ongoing manner with death, because death reminds us that, you know, it's our families and it's our loved ones and it's our friends. Like you guys are such great friends, you know, that those are the things that are the most important. And we somehow get confused that it's the job, or it's, you know, paying the bills, or it's all those times, or doing the dishes, you know, where we stop being present for those that we love. So it's a yes. It's our own pieces that we need to work on.
Yeah, and you know, I was thinking about this when I was reading through your bio, because one of the courses that I've taught in the past is called Life Between Lives. And it's the idea of the contracts that we make that we have come here to live out. And sometimes we made those contracts without quite understanding what the hell they were going to entail. You know, I want to, who was it? Were you, Raven? I don't know. Someone. I want to experience forgiveness. And boy, have they been given a lot to forgive.
That wasn't me.
Okay.
No, that wasn't me. I don't think that was me.
But anyway, the point being that, you know, we sometimes are to realize we are part of a continuum of time, that this body is not immortal. It has a finite beginning and a finite ending. But we, the inhabitants of this body, are immortal. And as we move through time, we have many different bodies. Now, do they all look like, you know, 2 hands, 2 feet, and, you know, head? Not necessarily. I don't know whether they do or not. But we are given the opportunity to come to this school that is called Earth and work through some of our issues so that we can move on to somewhere else where maybe there's a different type of body or a different type of being. But when we are here, the most important thing we can do is be here. Yeah. And to be here with other human beings, to be here with other creatures, with other, you know, to look at what is going on around us and say, up with this I will not put. This is, you know, I'm not willing to put up with this anymore around me. And I want it changed. And therefore, I am going to make a difference. You know, I mentioned Pachamama earlier. I was at Lynn Twist's organization, a luncheon here just recently, the Pachamama Foundation. And I can remember when Lynn Twist was like 94 or something like that, and she was doing The Soul of Money. And she was saying that she just felt that there was a greater calling for her, but that this is how she was going to get there. She didn't know how it was. And then she told the story how in 1997 they felt like they were called to the Amazon in order to make a difference. And now they have a foundation that is working with a number of different tribes down there. It's a multi-million-dollar foundation that is doing a tremendous amount of work. But, you know, I remember, like, you know, sitting in circle with her, talking about finances and money and what we were going to do. I think it was with Kathy Ann up at the Center for Spiritual Living. And that her point that, I know there's something bigger for me to do. I just know that this is a step along the way. And so I think people need to look at, this may be just a step along your way. And it may not be a step where you're going to stay in the same body.
Yeah. Well, and part of that too, Gloria, that ties really back, as we were talking about earlier with that change your story, change your life.
Mm-hmm.
It's that I think sometimes it's so much easier for people to stay in that old story. A lot of people say, I want a different story. But really, it's easier to stay with the old issues. It's easier to stay with that known. It takes that courage that Lynn has to say, I don't know what it is, but I know there's something greater. And I'm willing to put everything on the line to create that something greater without having to have the answer. And to say, I'm not going to be informed by the old story. This is what to have that question, what do you want to create? I mean, so many people struggle with that one, and they go back to, well, I can't. I can't create that because I call them yeah buts, because yeah, but I have kids. Yeah, but I don't have money. Yeah, but I got, work. Instead of going, step into what you want to create, and then we know Spirit and Source will be there to support you. It's just our attention is going back to what we don't want instead of what we do want to create. And then the courage to step forward and create that.
And the more attention we put on what we don't want, the more we create what we don't want.
Right.
Because
our hands are full with the old stuff, then we can't hold on to something new.
Yeah, I was thinking about this today as I was driving over to the nursing home, and I was thinking, what would happen if I just let go of everything? Because, it's just like, I don't know where to go. I've done this show now for almost a year, and I know there's a greater purpose for it, but I don't know what it is, and I don't know where we're going with it. I know I'm scheduled through September now, but I still don't know what's going on. And I show up on Tuesday evenings, so does Raven, and we do our thing. But where is it going? We don't know. That's not the point. The point was to create a container in which others could have the opportunity to hear people like you, Linda, and people, we've had wonderful people on here that have, ranging from, we have Normandy Ellis, Nikki Scully, and we've got a bunch of people coming on that I don't know them, but they sound absolutely fabulous, and we're going to have a ball listening to what they have to say. But as we work with that different energies, sometimes I sit here and I go, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing. Would somebody please tell me what it is I'm supposed to be doing?
That's the one that we know. We want the answers. Just let me know the answer. Yeah, and you're doing that demonstration of we step in. One of the things that usually I'll tell students is a lot of times we have to say no to a lot of things to be able to say yes, even though we don't know what that yes is. So I look at, so when you emailed Gloria, of course it was yes. Even though I didn't Google the show, I didn't do that, it's like if you found me, then it's supposed to be yes. So without me going, I don't know what I'll say, I don't know any of this, go yes, show up. This is, the Spirit says, great, be there for that. So, and a lot of at times it means, I have to say no to those day-to-day things that I feel like, oh, that's really important to do. So, yeah, we show up, at least through September, right? So.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that somewhere along in August I'm going to say, hey, by the way, folks, if you want to be on the show, you better get to me now. So, it kind of keeps rolling that way. But it's interesting to look at it, and as I said, I'm kind of looking at this from a different point of view today. Instead of being just the facilitator, I'm looking at it as the priestess. And as the priestess in this space, what am I doing and what am I doing next? You know, where do you want me to go? Send me, I will go. Where do you want me to go? What do you want me to do? But for God's sake, please tell me. You know, it's like, give me a sign.
And shamanically, usually those moments are the ones when you go back to fire or to a water ceremony or, you know, a Peruvian despacho. You know, I love that one of your questions was, how did you ask that? Which goddess, if I was going to pick one? And the one that I had picked was Kuan Yin. And then what was it about Kuan Yin? And it's, to me, that shamanic place, which is interesting as we talk about death, that we go, I picked her because, you know, she went over, but then chose to come back. And I think that's what we're really called to do in that priestess place, is to take our wisdom, you know, go over, take that wisdom, but we come back. We come back to be of service. So whatever wisdom that you're bringing back, so that we make that choice, knowing that of course you could say, yeah, you know, I want to check out or go over, but it's take that wisdom, we bring it back in service. Take that wisdom, we bring it back in service. So it's that, I think that's that place of, and with Kuan Yin also, the one that sees, you know, so you see this place, and even though you may not have the answer, you still say yes to it. It's like, yes, give me the answer, but you also know that you're getting the answer every second. You know, it's that sitting in that quandary where you hold both. It's like, yeah, I want it spelled out, and yet you know that it is spelled out for you every moment. You know, that you can sit in that place and still maintain your sanity. You know, it's like, okay, yeah, I got it.
Well, I'm not so sure maintaining my sanity is necessarily a good point, but but you know, Ann Key and Goddess Inc. has just come out with a book on Kuan Yin. And Raven, did you have that book?
I don't.
I don't have it either. We're both bad representatives, I guess. But it's a beautiful book. It's full color.
It is a beautiful book. It's good.
And, you know, one of the things that I know is that, like with Kuan Yin, it's about surrendering, because she stepped over to the other side, and then she said, no, I'll come back because they need me. But she also had to surrender to that being her destiny. And that's a hard one. You know, whenever you've gotten to the point where it's like, oh, I don't have to do this anymore, but I have to do this because other people need me to do it. And of course, the work you are doing, which is tremendously important, is about work that maybe you need to do for yourself, but also for others. And, you know, even as a shaman, what drew you to the idea of the conscious dying, the grief counseling?
Well, and when I started with the death and dying work, actually, Alberto, I was working with Alberto Vialdo at the time, and he asked me and suggested that I really, really look and make that not one of my specialty areas, but to really look into it. And of course, I had those kind of wonderments, you know, as I dove deeper and deeper into that. You know, is it about my own death? You know, my kids, is it about that I understand this because my kids are going to die? You know, all that fear stuff comes up, like, you know, to jump into those places. And then within that time period, my dad died. And I knew it had nothing to do with it, but it was this place of then recognizing that in those final moments, or in that journey, that really everything that we're here for is to learn how to, and you've heard this, to learn how to die, so that we can be, and every lesson with it, every time even I go back in again, is that how do I stay more present? How do I be more present for myself? You know, how do I shift out of those patterns that hold me, my, you know, as one of the oldest of my family, you know, that over-sacrificing, all those feminine things of taking on too much, of doing too much, of loving others more than I love myself, you know, of doing those things. How do I continue to work that again and again and again? So it really is that deep recognition that death is our ally, and that if there's some way to at least be a voice for that, and yet then give skills to be able to work with it. I think that's a beautiful part of the shamanic work, is that every shamanic teaching has where you have to go through your own death again and again, you know, whether it's in journey or whether it's somebody lifts your luminous energy field and lets it go, but you always have to, or going up the staircase and letting those parts of you that need to die, but that how death needs to be part of our communication all the time, that allows us to stay present.
Yeah, you know, our civilization, our Western civilization particularly, has moved away from death rituals. They have moved away from rituals that sanctified death and dying. They've also moved away from rituals that basically honored the person who has moved on. I mean, we have a funeral, we throw a few roses into there, and we go have food. But, you know, if you look at it from the point of view of some of the older traditions, of the idea of sitting Shiva for somebody for 7 days, in which the family sits on low chairs and doesn't move, except, you know, bodily functions, and are the idea that we, you know, build a pyramid and put in all their bodily, their goods, and that because we believe that they are going on to a better place. You know, there's a number of things that we don't do anymore. It's like it's death in many ways is to be avoided as long as possible. And when it does happen, it's, well, that's done. Let's move on. One of our friends, her father passed away about a year ago. And it's been very difficult for her. He was very close to her, even though they didn't live anywhere near each other. And it's been very difficult for her to move forward. And people keep telling her, well, you know, your father died 6 months ago, or 9 months ago. Or aren't you over it yet? No. I mean, she may not be over it for a long time to come. So the idea that we have to look at, you know, I think that as shamanic practitioners, as priestesses, we have to look at how we can facilitate, in many ways, what is inevitable. And that is the passing on, whether it's the passing on of a pet, or the passing on of a parent, or the passing on of ourselves. And that by moving into that space and learning that in the best way we know how, we are learning how to be able to stand up and say, this is a good day to die. So, you know, I know that the work you are doing is very important, and I know that you're, you know, as I noticed that you're, it says that you're working to become a certified grief counselor. Tell me about that.
Well, you know, you were talking about So Boomfu, and I would say that's probably one of my, if I looked at it, that's outside the traditional model. With the Dogra system, I don't know if everybody listening is familiar with Sobumfu and Malidoma Some. And Sobumfu's made that specialty of working with grief. And I just love the model of that community where it isn't that question. It's not, aren't you done with this yet? Instead, it is, what's still there? You know, let's talk about it. What still is there that needs to be brought up? And then have a way of a ritual, have a way of handling the grief that comes up so you don't get buried under it. Because I think that's what happens so much, is that people don't want to open up that grief because it's just they feel like they'll get lost in it. So the beautiful system of being able to have an altar, one of those that I give to my clients many times, and it can be personal, whether they're working with personal grief, or even one of my clients had her husband was one of those Vietnam vets that everybody in the platoon died, but he couldn't work on it, but grief just permeated the house. Everything had so much grief. And so she did a grief altar in the house just to help let go of some of that grief that was in the house. So a lot of times what I have them do is do a black cloth and a black bowl with water and salt in it, and then candles. And then when they have time to grief, then they'll light the candles, and the altar will take a lot of that grief from them, and then they have a way to then, blow out the candles so that the grief, they can hold it in a container, and yet it is a way, the ritual in itself then allows a lot of that to leave out of their body, to shed that. And it's amazing processes with it. So the grief is another one that's like death, that we carry it around and we don't want to talk about it, but almost any time we have to create a new story, if we hold on to the old one, there's old grief that needs to be let go of, that needs to be brought up. It was fascinating. I was teaching over in New Zealand in February, and because of their culture, they are given just minutes to grieve. It's like that you have, it's like, aren't you over this? But it's so much more even in the States. It's like, great, you have to be done. So we were working with grief altars, and there was a young woman. We were just about ready to start class. In 5 minutes, she jumps up out of the circle, runs over to the grief altar. Somebody went with her because we want to make sure that we're not grieving alone, because that's such a Western way. Go upstairs in your room by yourself. Go to the bathroom and lock the door. We don't want to hear your tears. We don't want to see your tears. We don't want to see any of this. So, of course, then somebody goes with her. 5 minutes, she was at the grief altar, did her grieving, bam, sat back down. By the time we started circle, she was sitting back in her chair. And it was just so cultural, and they all laugh about it, but it's so cultural how long that we're given. In New Zealand, they're not, and Australia, very similar, there's no time given for grief.
And if our culture doesn't support any time for grieving for someone who's died, we certainly are not given any time to grieve for personal loss in other ways. Whether it's a disappointment in ourselves, whether it's a family disappointment, a job, physically, health, whatever it is, those things that bring us personal grief, people don't want to hear about it. They'd say, get over it. Just get over it. Quit complaining, get over it. And it's like, wow, my heart's broken. I'm not over it. Or somebody else's. You can see it in people's face when someone says to them, just get over it. It's like, why don't you just slap them across the face? And we don't even give them 5 minutes. It's just like, come on, you're a big girl. Pull up your big panties and go home and get over it. And it's just not that easy. And it's really, it's too bad that we don't have a better way to figure that out for ourselves and to get support. It's better, I think, than it used to be. Women are certainly more supportive to one another. I don't know how men do it, but women are much better. But as a whole, society is not happy about that. Yeah.
Well, the New Zealanders that you are referring to, are you talking about white New Zealanders, or are you talking about the Maori?
It was white New Zealanders, although we had a couple Maori that were in class. It was the more that cultural is that white New Zealanders. Yeah.
Okay, I was just curious because I figured the Maori must have something a little bit different than that. I don't know. I've never studied that tradition, so it's an interesting tradition. They have great tattoos.
Yes, so I really would like to ask Linda a question.
Sure.
May I kind of shift gears? And I don't know, I'm not asking you to analyze a particular person, but I have a woman that I worked with here for many, many years. She was married for 3 months Her husband was in a terrible accident and went into a coma and was in a coma for over 30 years. And she used to say to me, "What is this about? Why?" And she never cheated on him. She never got another man. She stayed with him. They were married 3 months. And she spent over 30 years taking care of him while he was in a coma. And she said, "What do you think is going on?" And I said, "I don't know, except that for some reason he must have such intense work to do that he can't be in his body to do it, but he can't die yet. And you're his guardian." I don't know what else to say. What have you experienced anything with that kind of a situation where people are in that kind of intense, long-term, prolonged dying?
That's an amazing story, Catherine. That's just amazing. And I love your answer with it. You know, in that place of the coma, it's a very, very fascinating place. I know one time I was doing some client work with the individuals. Their daughter had been involved in a really tragic school bus accident. And they actually, the paramedics, called her dead on the scene, so they didn't even do any triage for her. And it wasn't until they were, you know, getting ready to bag up the bodies that they recognized that she was still alive. And she was in a coma, and in the journey work with her, so I did all the shamanic stuff, the soul retrieval, because anytime we have that big of a trauma, then of course the loss of the soul that happens with it. So did the soul retrieval, did the work, and her parents, wanted me to make her, bring her back so that she would continue to live. And I would journey with her, but to come back into that body that was so, you just knew, she knew what it was going to be, that journey. And I'd journey out with her, and I'd say, if you want me to help you cross over, I'll help you cross over. If you want me to do what I can to help you stay present on this earth, knowing the body you have to come back into, I'll do everything with that too. But really, even though the parents were the ones that had contacted me, it was really her choice, to give her everything, do everything possible, and then make her choice okay. Because it's really, she's the one that had to go with that. And I remember she came into my office, I think it was about 3 years after that, and I just broke, she looked at me and she goes, and she's limping still, because it was quite the body that had to come back into it. And she goes, "Linda, do you remember me?" And she looked vaguely familiar, and I'm like, "Yeah, I don't think so." And then she reminded me of the story. And she had to learn how to walk, she had to learn how to speak, it was quite the journey. So in that place, I think you have that best answer for her, where it really is then her choice as she sits in there to be the guardian. How does she want to be that guardian? And then his journey of what that soul's journey, I love it of that choice that he made in whatever way to either just stay in that place. So as a shaman, I typically journey out with them to see, because sometimes what happens in that coma place is that it's the same thing when we die, is that there's nothing to hold on to. So there's outside of time and space. So then how can you, from a shamanic standpoint, give them resources to allow them that soul retrieval, that journey, a place where you can actually see them in that no man's land and help them come back to the physical form. Wow, what a story.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've got, there's a young woman at the nursing home where my husband is who fell down her stairs 5 years ago and has been in a coma ever since. Now, the interesting thing is that she is in a coma, but she smiles, she laughs sometimes, she moves her eyes around. It's like, and if you speak to her, it's real obvious that she's listening. Yeah. But she can't come back. And her aunt, who takes her guardian, asked me, what would I do? And I said, well, she's in a space that she needs to take herself out of. And it's up to her where she wants to go. There's nothing we can do to pull her out of there. And she is now getting to the point, like Raven's friend's husband, that the body she would be coming back to is in pretty bad shape.
Yeah.
And whether or not she wants to do that or not, I don't know.
Time may not exist for that soul,
Right.
but it sure does exist on the body.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very interesting. I think about that a lot, you know.
So before we end up here, I wanted to talk a little bit about what Linda has coming up. In that, as I said earlier, she's about to leave for Peru, right? Or
Yes.
Ecuador, Peru. All
Yeah,
right. Peru. Okay, to Mount Salcante. I'll learn to say these things eventually. I learned how to say sexy woman about, like, you know,
yeah.
a long time after I first saw the words. And you go there once or twice a year?
Typically to Peru once a year, so this is one of my very favorite mountains. I think next year I'm going to go to the Masculine Mountain because it has been calling me over the last 5 or 6 years, reminding me that I need to come back. So Salcantay, and it's wonderful. We actually go up with the Caro, who are like the, you know, the priests and the priestesses of Peru. They're the native from the descendants of the Inca, and so we journey with them, and we mostly do ceremony. So every night we do a despacho, and then we do rites. So whether it is rites of connection to the earth, which are called the Pampa Masayok, or they are the Alta Masayok, connection to the mountains or connection to the stars. And then to hear the messages from the Caro. And typically their messages are really about love. You know, it's about Munai. Take this home. You know, be present with your loved ones. Take this love home. Come from your places of your heart. And I look at the journey to the sacred mountain. The Salcantay is actually, Salka means wild. So it's like your wild woman. So it's like it's a wild, undomesticated mountain. And in the journey, what you do in any kind of journey you do to Peru, it's almost like you create, they call them seke lines, or they're sourcing lines, that then you're sourced by a mountain the rest of your life. You know, so you're always sourced by the mountain, and you know, mountains are so much, it is definitely that spiritual pilgrimage that so many individuals have taken to the mountain. So I love this journey, and it's really my honor to sit and to be that facilitator and hold the space that allows, and to hold the container that allows men and women to come to the place where they really come to that authentic who they are of their souls. I've had some people over the years that have said, you know, I can't go because I know if I do I'll divorce my husband, or I can't go because I know it'll be too big of a change in my life. And they're right on. I always honor that, because you can't go to the mountains without really coming back and living that true self. The mountains won't let you do it. You know, they keep you in this place of integrity, of walking that place of integrity with the mountains. So that's coming up in another week, and we'll do, because I'm on the show here, you know, what we do is we do what they're called apuchetas. You've seen them, those stack of rocks. And so we'll do apuchetas, which are about making yourself visible for spirit. And I'll put a stone up on that apucheta for everybody listening. So, and for both you, for Catherine and Gloria, I'll put a stone up there for the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. We really appreciate that. And then also you have the class that you're about to launch, which is Change Your Story, Change Your Life. When is that going to be available?
So I've been doing those in 2014 and 2015. So I'm teaching them up in Cape Cod, and I teach it down in Florida. And mostly for this August and this summer, I have another class on dreams. Because, you know, the time, it's all about living in sacred time and dream time. So with our dreams, the same thing when the shaman picks up their drum and they take you into that alpha theta state. That's the same thing you do when you're in that dream state. So really, when we work with it, is how do you not just in that nighttime sleep, but then how do you work with that place of dreams so that you are recognizing what's really, really important, which is that place of, and actually the dream yogis, where it's just that step over to death, so that you recognize how impermeable all those other places are. We don't hold our lives quite so rigid. So I've got a couple of classes that are happening this summer all around dream work, and then one that's going to be in Atlanta where it'll be about shamans tracking and divination. So lots of fun summer things.
Well, it sounds fabulous. And then you have a new book that you said will be coming out. I believe it's in the calendar for next year. Shamanic Awakening: My Journey Between the Dark and the Light from Inner Traditions.
No, but I love it. I am working with the publisher on several different books, but I love that one. I could take that one in a heartbeat.
Oh, sorry, I apologize. That's Sandra Cochran, who will be on next week.
Yeah. That's great. I'll have to listen to hers.
Yeah, well, I apologize. I had it up there to remind me, and I'm just, I got into that dream time and that space, and I can't keep my shaman straight. What can I say? But you are going to be available, and for people who want to get in touch with you, who want to study with you, how is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
A website, yeah. So it's Linda L. Fitch. So there's a photographer named Linda Fitch who will send me emails if somebody emails trying to get a hold of me. And she does sacred photography, which is amazing. So my website has Linda L. Fitch, and it has my schedule of classes and sessions and how to get a hold of me and all those kind of wonderful things.
Well, that sounds fabulous, and I would love to go with Peru with you sometime. I haven't been there yet. And thank you so much for being on this evening and telling us, talking with us this evening and talking to us about all the different wondrous things. I'd love to spend a lot longer. Obviously, this is something that is very, very close to my heart. And Miss Raven, I want to thank you for being on here this evening.
Thanks, darling.
And Raven is the most brilliant tarot reader on earth.
Oh.
So if you haven't had your tarot cards read, you should have your tarot cards read by her. So, and they can reach you at
Catherine, which is Kathryn, ravenwood.com, or kravenwood at Yahoo. And I have a special on right now.
All right. So, and she's also on Facebook. So, as it seems like all of the world is. Yeah. And next week we do have on. I apologize for that earlier. Sandra Cochran from who is the author of Shamanic Awakening: My Journey Between the Dark and the Daylight, and she will be on. We'll have her on with a co-host of Ingrid Ronlove, because our dear Raven is going to church that night. So
I work for an Episcopal church that for the last 30 years was a champion of gay rights and welcoming gay people into church and participating in all the sacraments of church that they could, but not weddings, because the diocese wouldn't allow that. And they was very shunned. In fact, they were building a new building, and when the Diocese of the Rio Grande in its old days found out that we were doing a ceremony of welcoming gay and lesbians into the church, they cut off the funding. And it's turned around. And so next Tuesday, the current bishop called us and said, "Are you doing your gay pride service? Because I want to come preach and celebrate the Eucharist for the gay pride community." So it's a very big deal. And I mean, it's a huge deal. And I want to honor that part of my community that has been so left out for so long. So I'm going to church Tuesday night.
So Raven will remember us in the Episcopalian Church. And if any of you are in Albuquerque, I know we have a number of people who are from Albuquerque.
Yeah.
They
Tonight,
are
7 o'clock, the Gay Pride service. So come on down. St.
Yeah.
Michael and All Angels, Episcopal Church, 4th and Montagna.
Yeah. So, and want to thank you all for being present. I do appreciate the people who have. Some of you I know have stayed up late. Some of you have gotten up early. And you know, we got some comments from one of those shows recently, and it was from a man. And he said, "I've been watching this show." And he says, "I want you to know that I know your show is intended for women, but it has gotten me through one of the darkest times of my life."
Well, if you're listening tonight, bless you, our brother. We bless you.
So welcome, and welcome anyone who's willing to come and listen to us. Like I said, we have no idea where we're going, and sometimes we don't even know what we're doing. But we will do our very best to bring you a good show and a good interview and a good conversation and give you the opportunity to make things different in your life. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next week with Sandra Corcoran and Ingrid Runlove. And for tonight, thank you and good night.
Good night.